Tell me if you've ever done this. You're watching a TV series or a movie, and suddenly you see on the screen an amazing sweater that appears to be hand knit. You scramble for the remote, press pause, rewind, and pause again, and then stare at the screen, maybe even get up and walk over to it and study every stitch of the sweater, and then possibly even snap a picture for future reference. This happens to me on the reg, including a movie I just went to a few days ago. Are you curious about which pop culture knits have gotten my attention? If yes, then follow me into the lounge for some screen sweater inspiration and questions and answers. So I was thinking to myself, why do we get so fascinated when we see sweaters on the screen in TV shows or a movie? And I think a little bit it boils down to we don't often get to see hand knit sweaters in live action on a human going about their daily business. We're usually restricted just to seeing them in heavily staged and styled photo shoots for those hero pics in the patterns themselves. So for me, one of the things that intrigues me is seeing a person wearing that sweater, going around doing stuff, helps me see that sweater in the context of, oh yeah, that looks like a great sweater that's actually wearable in real life and looks really good from all angles and is practical as well as eye-catching. Before we go any further, because I know you're going to ask, what I'm wearing is the Clamber cardigan by Norah Gaughan. It has absolutely nothing to do with this video. I was just trying to look summery today, and I think in my white cotton lacy cable knit pullover thing, mission accomplished. The information for this sweater will be down in the video description box, as always. Moving on. I have picked out some cool sweaters that have gotten my attention over the years, and some quite recently, some long ago. These are strictly the ones that do it for me. Here's what I'm not going to talk about today. I'm not going to talk about Harry Potter scarves and sweaters, or the famous Doctor Who scarf, or Mr. Rogers' iconic red cardigan, or anything from Outlander or Jane Eyre. And part of that is because really none of those things are my aesthetic, intrigued me all that much, but mostly because all of those have been covered ad nauseum. So I'm going to show you some examples of what made me scramble for the remote. Some you might already know about, and I'm guessing a few of these are going to be new to you. Let's start today with a couple of knits that I have been particularly attracted to in a TV show. The first one I want to talk about is the Netflix detective series called The Killing, which was first up on Netflix about 10 years ago. And at the time, and I'm talking about the US remake of The Killing that was originally a Danish series called Forbruensen. I think I got that right. The US version of The Killing was set in Seattle, but was filmed in New Westminster, British Columbia, which is very close to Vancouver. And I was living in New Westminster at the time. So it was super fun for us to watch this series and look on the screen, not only at the amazing hand knits I'm about to tell you about, but also at the locations. Hey, that's just down the street from us. Hey, that's by the SkyTrain. Hey, we stood right there. I know, it's silly, but we enjoy that sort of thing. And we are big movie watchers. The protagonists in both these series are women detectives. In the Danish series, the character's name is Sarah Lund, and in the US series, her name is Sarah Linden. And they both spend the entire series wearing absolutely incredible hand knit sweaters. I remember watching The Killing and just being completely focused every episode on the sweater that she happened to be wearing. So let's start looking at the sweaters themselves. In the Danish series, the character Sarah Lund, who is played by Sophie Grubbel, always wore gorgeous hand-knit Icelandic sweaters, which were made by a slow fashion knitwear company called Gudrun and Gudrun. I've put the link to their website down in the video description box below. It's really fascinating. Go take a look. This sweater that Sarah Lund wears often in the Danish series in both a white background with black motifs and a black background with white motifs is called Vaughan. You can still buy this sweater today, and the link is below. All the links are below. So her sweaters were obviously the inspiration for the sweaters that Sarah Linden, who is played by Mireille Enos in the American version, for the sweaters that she wears all the time in that series, set in Seattle, where it's always raining. The actor Mireille Enos actually said in an interview one time that she was pretty sure that they had 2 versions of every sweater. And there was one in particular that was the favorite that she wore in probably 4 episodes. I think it was this one. And apparently by the end of the series, she absolutely hated that sweater. I was really curious about her sweaters in this series. So I was trying to find out who knit them because they looked hand knit. However, after hours of research, and I'm not exaggerating, I found a note somewhere that said that the sweaters from the US killing were made by Harley of Scotland. And Harley of Scotland actually machine knits their sweaters, but in a very hands-on sort of way. So although the bulk of the knitting is done on a machine, it's not the same as commercial machine knitting. Their website is also very cool and down in the description box. This particular blue one I found on a Reddit post, a designer named Raga Eriks, who said that that sweater was based on one of her patterns called Maren, which was included in a Craftsy class that she had on the Craftsy platform, a Craftsy video class. And that class is still there if you want to take it. It's called the Top-Down Icelandic Sweater. And again, the link is down in the description box. So if you wanted to knit a version of this sweater, that's exactly how you could do it. I don't know that the pattern is available outside of that Craftsy class. It didn't look like it was from my Ravel research. The Killing is a really great series. I haven't watched the Danish one, so I can't compare them. But the US one, if you enjoy a good, dark, moody detective series, especially with a female protagonist, excellent series, well worth watching, and great hand-knit sweater eye candy throughout. Moving on to my second entry in the TV category. And this is another series that I found on Netflix a few years back. Just happened on it in a search, called AP Bio, a silly little sitcom about high school. The main character, who is played by Glenn Howerton, the character's name is Jack Griffin, wears these grandpa shawl collar sweaters in every episode with sweatpants. And I was always intrigued by them. But then in one episode, I stopped dead in my tracks, grabbed the remote, and took this picture. This cable knit blue sweater just took my breath away. As I zoomed in and looked closer and closer and closer at it, I realized that the cables were made out of cables. I have spent a lot of time on the internet trying to find who knit this, is it hand knit, who made it. So I took my image and I went into Google and I used the image search, and you can see that I scrolled down here looking. There was no exact match, but the closest thing I could come up with was that I think most of his sweaters were made by Ralph Lauren, and there is one that's pretty close to the same style, if not exactly the same cables. So then I went to Ravelry to see if anybody had picked up on these sweaters from AP Bio and decided to make patterns out of them. And I couldn't find anything, but there were a couple that were pretty close. I ran an advanced search in the patterns for menswear or unisex, cabled cardigan, and scrolled through a zillion pages of hits. Only found a few that were kind of close, but nothing exactly like this particular sweater. This one, called the Belfast cardigan by Irina Anikeeva, is pretty close and very cool. She has some really incredible menswear patterns. That's for a whole other video. And then while I was scrolling through, I spotted this Logan Roy cardigan by Athena Liu, and Succession is another one of my very favorite recent series. I hadn't even thought about the sweaters in Succession. They could be a whole video on their own, but another cool pattern based on a TV series. So I really couldn't find anything that scratched my itch about that cabled sweater from AP Bio. So then I thought, okay, I'm just going to have to do it myself. And I started looking at some of my resources. So I looked in all of my stitch dictionaries, including my Barbara Walker's, and there wasn't really anything. This Vogue Knitting Stitchtionary I think it's number 6 in the series, called Cables. I can't remember. There's a whole series of these Vogue Knitting Stitchionaries, and I found in here this cable, which has a very tight cable within a cable, which looks a lot like the one in the sweater that I'm trying to match. So there's a component I can use. I looked in my Japanese Stitch Bible because I thought complex cable patterns, if they're anywhere, they're going to be in here. But I didn't really find anything in here that was useful to recreate this cable chart. So I'm going to have to make it up. So I'm going to use my Stitchmastery software. And again, the link for Stitchmastery will be down below. And I'm just going to recreate this chart, and you'll just have to wait for another video to see how it turned out. Now let's talk about movies. I have had lots of, oh my God, look at that sweater movie moments over the years. And the first one I want to talk about is one that has been done a lot everywhere, but I was very intrigued by this knit when I first saw it. And that is Katniss's hunting cowl, asymmetrical hunting cowl from the Hunger Games. If you go search this one on Ravelry, there are dozens of hits on this. Lots of people wanted to recreate this after they saw it, both in knitting and crochet. A couple of the ones that really stood out as very, very close to the original were the Panem Katniss Cowl Wrap by Dahlia in Bloom. She really got the original down. That woven look and the movement of the directional changes of the stitches and the solid stand-up rolled collar, all very cool. I'm not sure that I would wear this myself, but I almost want to knit it just because I find it so interesting as a piece of useful knitwear that's also a little bit artsy and modern. Another good one was the Huntress cowl by LollyKnits, also pretty close. Along with the Archer cowl, for which there is a knitting pattern tutorial, and this one was done by Esther Poe. You can also find lots of these knit and crocheted up and for sale on Etsy. There's a ton of links down below on all of this. Let's move on. I am a huge Coen Brothers movie fan. The Coen Brothers, who are Joel and Ethan Coen, write, direct, and produce movies, one of which is The Big Lebowski. The sweater in The Big Lebowski is the one that Jeff Bridges, also known as The Dude, wears throughout the whole movie. And there's no point in talking about anybody's version of it except Andrea Rangel, who lives right here in my area. She's an incredible designer. You should go check her out if you don't know about her. She's also the designer of the Descent sweaters, the ones based on Ruth Bader Ginsburg's white lace collar from her judicial robes. Her pattern, The Knitter's Dude, is fantastic. I knit this adorable little baby-sized version of it once, but I absolutely want to knit it for myself. It's on my list of must-knit someday sweaters. So as you can see, she designed versions of it in all sizes for the whole family. Very cool. Props to Andrea. And another one that you probably are aware of is this white cable luscious bit of cashmere deliciousness that Cameron Diaz wore in the movie The Holiday. This is definitely one that had me stopping the video to take a closer look. And I spent a lot of research tracking this one down too. The best pattern version of this is called the Fireside Sweater by Amber Allison. She really nailed it. This is a version I found by someone named Dee Dee Struthers on a Reddit thread. It's good, right? The sweater could actually be purchased by a company called TSE Cashmere for a mere $995 US. But you know, cashmere. You could also find them on Etsy already knit up for sale. And the prices seem to range from just under $400 up to $722-ish. But the shop that was selling a really good version of it for $722 seems to be on a break at the moment. However, pretty yummy, lush looking sweater. Another one that I would really love to knit someday. A bit more recently, there was a movie out called Knives Out, starring my Daniel Craig. And this photo of Chris Evans wearing this Irish cable knit sweater was everywhere. And of course, knitters wanted to recreate this sweater. How could you not? The original sweater was made by Blarney Woolen Mills. And after this movie came out, they had 150% increase in sales of this sweater, which on their site is called the Blasket Honeycomb Stitch Aran Sweater. I did another Ravelry search and I found a couple of them that are pretty good. The Handsome Chris Pullover by Karen Schaefer is awfully close, if not bang on. And another good one was the Knives Out Fisherman Sweater by Valentina Tasson. Both of them get props for their versions of that sweater. Now, before we get to the last of my hand knit movie sweater show and tells, which is the one that I just saw last weekend, if you are a regular viewer or subscriber or you're brand new here but having a really good time, Oscar and I are inviting you to join the brand new Knicoleknits After Hours Lounge membership and become an After Hours Lounger. In the lounge, you can hang out with us for some super fun and exclusive content. If you're watching this in a browser, you'll see a join button down below the video title. You can click that and watch a short little video of all about what's going on in the After Hours Lounge. If you're on an iPad or a tablet, there's a link in the video description box you can use to get to that same video. Not interested? No worries. Absolutely nothing on the channel is going to change. This is just a little something extra for those who want more. Now, let's move on to my most recent screen sweater distraction. Just this past weekend, I went to see A Quiet Place Day One, which is the prequel to the movie A Quiet Place, written and produced by John Krasinski from The Office. Lupita Nyong'o's character in the movie wears this mustard color shawl collar cardigan through the whole movie. The whole movie takes place in one day. So she's wearing this cardigan from the start of the film to the end. And so it was very hard to keep my eyes off it and focus on what was going on in the film. Now, there's nothing fancy about it, but it was the watching her wear it through all of the adventures and shenanigans she got up to that day that made it so intriguing. It just looked like the perfect garment to have on for that particularly challenging day of activities. I'm deliberately being a little vague because I don't want to give anything away. Great movie. Go see it. Edge of your seat every second. And there's a really cute kitty cat. Anyway, the sweater is almost a character of its own. I scoured the internet. I had a really hard time getting good shots of details of the sweater, but I did my best. So you can tell it's got a ribbed shawl collar. It's long. It has big pockets. It's got big, loose, extra long sleeves. It's got kind of an O cable down close to the shoulder, and it's got a narrow little cable just inside the ribbing at the neckline, and it's very oversized. Now, because this movie is brand new, there's not much information out there about it yet, and no one has copied it, but it did remind me of something. This is a book of patterns by Shannon Cook and Jane Richmond, who also live in my area. Great designers, both of them. I did a video back in the fall about local designers in my area. Here's a link to it up here. You could go watch that. I'll apologize in advance. This was the one video that I experimented with music in the background. So if music in the background really bothers you, you might want to give that one a skip. I never did it again. But there is a pattern in this book called Timber that is pretty much the same color as the one worn in A Quiet Place. It's not a shawl collar, and it doesn't have any of the cable detailing, and I'm sure it's mostly the color that made me think of it. But it does have kind of a similar vibe to it as the one in the movie. Anyway, it came to mind, so I thought I'd show it to you. And now, for no reason at all, here's Daniel Craig in a sweater. Please let us know which screen or other pop culture knits have caught your attention. Have you ever knit any of them? Any of the ones that I've shown? Any others? We'd all love to know. If you're interested in more pattern deep dives, check out this video I made about knits that don't capture my imagination. Keep those needles clicking. I say goodbye. Oscar says goodbye. And we'll see you next week.